The son of an orderly hid a pen in the bed of a dying rich man. And as soon as the wife arrived with the notary and the will, "Kate, reconsider my offer," Stanley said with a smug smile as he prepared to leave. "No, thank you. I'll continue paying as before," Caitlin replied. The door slammed behind him, and she shuddered with a sense of unease. Stan rented the apartment to them along with his son. At first, everything went well. The rent was low, and the janitor's wages covered housing, food, and clothing. But a couple of months ago, the man started making advances. Sometimes he'd try to hug her, or suggest she come over, or even outright propose they live together and she wouldn't need to pay rent. Of course, at another time, Kate wouldn't tolerate this, but she was in a very difficult position now. Finding an apartment at that price was not easy, and even if she did, she needed a deposit, a realtor fee, which she couldn't save. Her son would start school next year, new expenses, and there was no one to help. Trying to avoid Stanley one-on-one, she continued to live in his apartment and, accordingly, paid him rent. "Miss Hardy, I've been wanting to ask you for a while," began the conversation the head doctor, Mr. Matthews, when the janitor was cleaning the floor in his office. "Your grandmother was an excellent specialist, worked as a pediatrician all her life. And how all children loved her, huh? Why didn't you follow in the family footsteps?" "Wanted to," Kate replied, pushing back a strand of hair that had escaped from under her cap. These inquiries didn't please her because they touched her sore spot. But marriage, a child. She kept putting it off. "Maybe take this table to the neighboring office? It's missing there, and here it seems extra." "And what about now?" "It's not too late to enroll and study," the elderly man persisted, flipping through some documents. "It's too late now, Mr. Matthews," she said reluctantly. "Why is that?" "I'm already 60 and still studying." "You're young, full of energy. We need responsible specialists." "Well, when my son grows up, maybe then I'll think about it." Kate gave in, just to end this dialogue. Mr. Matthews wouldn't ask such questions if he knew how hard it was for his employee. She got married very early. Soon a child was born, and family life overshadowed everything else. Kate dropped out of university. She found herself in the role of a mother and wife, diligently managing the household. She and her husband even thought about having another baby, but in recent years, troubles began to haunt her. First, her beloved grandmother died, then her husband got into an accident on the highway while transporting goods. She was informed after he died in the hospital. She didn't even have time to talk to him. The news undermined her, taking away all her strength and desires. The only thing that made her get out of bed every morning was her son, John. A cheerful, very much like his father boy with big blue eyes and unruly curls. Kate now bore all the burdens that she used to share with Brian. She couldn't afford to rent a 2-room apartment anymore. She had to move to a small studio. To earn more, Kate took on extra work. She agreed to work shifts on weekends and holidays. She took John with her, so everyone in the hospital already knew him, and he felt at home there. The last week had been particularly tough. John had his graduation, the daycare closed for the summer, it was scorching outside, and a mysterious patient appeared in the ward. A VIP room with all the amenities was set up for him. Kate had to clean it, which wasn't exactly pleasant. The ward manager, Mr. Blake, was the busiest around the new patient. He was a small, bald man, jittery and loud. But now he seemed different, quiet but efficient. Kate knew he was shady, liked to make extra money on the side, and wasn't averse to any opportunity, so she wasn't surprised even after catching the manager and the strange patient chatting amiably. "Don't worry, everything will be fine," said Mr. Blake and, turning around, asked Kate irritably. "What do you need?" "Time for cleaning," she replied calmly. The occupant of the VIP room quickly lay down on the bed again, assuming his mournful, suffering look. The manager put his hands in his pockets, sternly looked at the janitor, and headed for the door. "Okay, I'll come back later, but for now, take a break." Mr. Matthews joined these visits. With his hands behind his back, he strolled elegantly down the corridor, knocked on the VIP room, and entered. And 5 minutes later, he came out with a smile, which was unusual for him. The nurses whispered. Patients in other wards lively discussed what these VIP conditions were and for whom the chief doctor made such an effort. Mr. Blake came out of his office more often than usual. In short, with the appearance of the mysterious wealthy patient, everything in the ward somehow livened up. Only one person was not interested in these events at all. Kate, as always, continued to work diligently, filling in for vacationers. She herself didn't take vacations. On the contrary, she tried to take on as many shifts as possible. Especially since in the summer there was such a good opportunity to earn money. Somewhere deep down, she hoped she could save up for a move. She couldn't bear Stan's advances anymore. But she also didn't want to move with her child to a room in a communal apartment. If she didn't have a son, Kate would agree to live in the hospital or dormitory, cramming into the tightest rooms, but for John, she dreamed of creating all the conditions so that he didn't need anything and didn't remember childhood as the hardest time in life. Now, every day, the boy sat in the room where his mother changed and had lunch, watched cartoons, drew, sometimes went for a walk along the corridors, entertaining the patients with conversations. And they, in turn, treated him with sweets. There was a TV in the common room. And in the pediatric orthopedic department downstairs, there was a separate room with colorful walls, toys, and books. Kate arranged for John to play there. No one visited the VIP patient. But one day, the silence of the hospital corridor was broken by the sound of high heels. A beautiful, expensively dressed woman was heading to the sick man's room. "Eddie, how are you?" she asked sadly, sitting next to her husband's bed. "Not good," he barely audible replied. Kate heard this snippet of their conversation and couldn't shake off the feeling that a play was unfolding around her. She had seen with her own eyes how the patient confidently walked around the ward, conversed loudly and confidently with Ivan Pavlovich, and the hospital food, which was prepared for him with special care, quickly disappeared from his plate. It all didn't quite fit with the dying look he suddenly adopted in front of his wife. In the evening, as Kate was getting ready to go home, a distraught John burst into her office. "That meanie," he grumbled, starting to pack his toys into his backpack. "Who? What happened?" his mom asked. "That guy, the rich one in the fancy room." "Did you talk to the patients again?" "I know they called him rich." "Yeah. So, I went to Uncle Harold to play chess, and I went to the wrong room. And he tells me, 'Get out of here, kid. I don't want to see you here again.' Why should I be kicked out? I didn't even want to go to him." "Johnny, don't go there anymore," Kate pleaded. "Look at the number on the door. Remember, Uncle Harold's room is number 5. "Okay," agreed her son, looking angrily at the door at the end of the hallway. A sure sign that he was planning something. "He's just pretending to be sick." "How did you figure that out?" Caitlin asked, surprised by his attentiveness. "Because when someone visits him, he immediately lies down, puts a bandage on his forehead, and whispers. But when he's alone, he talks on the phone and laughs. I heard it myself." Yes, her son had grown up a lot. She had to accept that. Kate asked him not to tell anyone about the patient's manipulations, who knew what could happen. They didn't discuss the matter further. However, Caitlin underestimated her son and his ability to hold a grudge. Once again, during his rounds through the corridors, the boy noticed that the wealthy man was being wheeled away in a wheelchair. Even in the eyes of a child, it looked strange and surreal. The man was quietly talking to the nurse, moving his legs and arms, and generally looked quite healthy and content with life. But as soon as someone in a white coat appeared in another part of the corridor, Edward suddenly fell silent and wilted. His face took on the sad expression of a tormented man. John remembered how a few days ago he had rudely kicked him out of his room. During the days he spent there, no one had ever talked to him like that. On the contrary, he was friendly to both the staff and barely acquainted patients. Everyone smiled, asked something, treated him. Such behavior couldn't be forgiven. "Don't worry, you'll get yours," John whispered after the fraudster and headed to the expensive room, which, to his relief, was not locked. A large bed with snow-white linens, a table with fruits, blinds on the windows, a TV, paintings. Indeed, this room was very different from the others, furnished simply, with small curtains halfway up the windows, regular single beds, and boring green walls. Locking the door behind him, the boy quickly took out a pre-prepared pin from his pocket. Lifting the mattress, he pierced it from the bottom up so that the tip of the needle ended up on top but under the sheet. Making sure everything was done properly, John glanced into the corridor. No one was there, and he slipped out through the door, heading straight to Uncle Harold, who was returning to his room after the procedures. "Well, Johnny, chess or cards?" asked his regular guest. "Cards," he cheerfully replied, settling himself on the bed like a master. Edward, returning to his room, lay down and waited for his important visitors. Today, a deal was supposed to take place, on which his whole future depended. And for it to go well, he needed a lot of acting skill. Finally, everyone was gathered. On one side of the patient sat his pale wife, on the other the notary. Judging by the lack of emotion on his face, the man was already accustomed to such scenes and didn't particularly sympathize with them. But the woman was clearly not herself. Her hands were shaking, tears were streaming down her cheeks, and the words didn't come together into understandable sentences. "Lucy, please don't cry," Edward said quietly. "I'm very sorry. You'll be happy again." It seemed that each word was an effort for him. He closed his eyes and fell silent, as if gathering strength. The silence was interrupted by the notary, who seemed eager to finalize the documents and leave. "Mrs. Swanson, your husband is bequeathing his business to you as an inheritance. I will now read out the terms, and we will sign the papers." "What am I supposed to do with all this?" she asked, bewildered. "You'll manage," her husband encouraged her. The notary read out the main provisions. Edward listened with closed eyes, while Luxel didn't listen at all. Finally, it was time to sign. The patient was helped to sit up. Leaning on his hands, he pushed himself away from the bed and plopped back, only a bit higher, closer to the pillow. Then something unexpected happened. Edward suddenly screamed and jumped off the bed, feeling his back. John's surprise was embedded in his skin. The pain from the unexpected jab seemed unbearable, momentarily causing the patient to forget his role. Seeing her husband, who a minute ago seemed on the verge of death, now standing confidently on his feet and trying to return to his usual position, Luxel was first puzzled, then thoughtful. "So, you're saying you're terminally ill?" she asked, stretching out her words. The notary watched with surprise. "Yes, unfortunately." Edward lay back on the bed, having searched it beforehand and removed the needle. "Who could have done this? What am I paying them for?" Glancing towards the door, he noticed a curious eye in the slightly open doorway. There stood the culprit of his suffering, quietly chuckling with pleasure. He had come upon hearing the screams and witnessed the scene of the dying patient confidently standing on his feet and searching the bed for what had pricked him. John, of course, didn't understand how he had ruined this patient's entire plan. He just wanted to prove that he was perfectly healthy, just deceiving everyone. "What's going on?" Lucy wondered, shifting her gaze from her husband's angry face to the laughing boy behind the doors. The situation turned out to be as foolish as it was dangerous. Edward's business hadn't been profitable for a long time. On the contrary, it incurred significant losses. The unsuccessful entrepreneur tried to fix things, borrowing money, seeking consultations, signing contracts with dubious suppliers. Until he ultimately found himself in a hopeless situation. Debts, tax inspections, loss of reputation among clients, the problems were snowballing. He valued greatly the large apartment he inherited from his parents and 2 expensive cars. He didn't want to lose all this to pay off debts. And so he came up with what seemed to him a brilliant plan. "Are we signing or not?" the notary impatiently asked. He was tired of sitting in this room and waiting for the clients to resolve their issues. "Eddie," Luxel addressed her husband, "don't you want to explain anything to me?" "Lucy, I want you to manage the business. You know how important it is to me. And for this, you lie here and pretend to be dying?" She replied, rising. "I sometimes feel better," Edward tried to justify himself. "Okay," his wife nodded understandingly. "Then let's wait, maybe you'll fully recover." With these words, she left the room. From the hospital, she went straight to her husband's office. She had never been interested in his affairs before, but now there was a sharp desire to understand what was going on. The feeling of being deceived was no longer vague and empty. She was being set up somehow, but how? She needed to figure it out herself. The answer was right on the surface. The office was nearly deserted, employees had been laid off, some were suing to compel the company to pay their salaries for the past few months. Without leadership, new contracts weren't being signed, and old ones were being executed haphazardly. Overall, even to the untrained eye, it was clear that things were going terribly wrong. "And this is what you wanted to give me, darling?" Lucy asked aloud, looking at a large photograph of her husband on the wall in his office. It's incredible how one unconscious decision could change her entire fate. And she had trusted him completely. You could say she married him solely for that reason, to feel safe. The solid, self-assured Edward was the son of her father's good friend. They had known each other since childhood, spent a lot of time together, and after school, they went their separate ways to different cities and didn't see each other for a long time. As Lucy drove through the city, for some reason, that evening when her parents decided to arrange a meeting with old friends kept coming to mind. Her mother was winking at her slyly, and her father was very proud and pleased with himself. The guests were glancing at the young couple, as if expecting something. Eddie fully met those expectations. He wore a handsome suit, styled his hair, and behaved very gallantly. Only now, mentally returning there, Lucy suddenly realized. Everyone understood what was happening, except her. For 5 years of marriage, she considered their meeting a happy accident, fate's will, and a stroke of luck smiling at her. It wouldn't be accurate to say she loved her husband deeply. There were no strong feelings between them, but she saw him as a support, someone she could rely on in the most difficult situations. Of course, now all of that was crumbling before her eyes, although it was very difficult to believe in betrayal, despite the incontrovertible evidence. For several days, Lucy didn't answer Edward's calls, trying to make herself take the necessary but very difficult step. However, it wasn't just difficult for her. Coming to work in the morning, Kate, as usual, changed and went to clean the floors. She was stopped by Mr. Blake, who asked her to come to his office. "So, Caitlin," he began, afraid to look her in the eyes. "We're letting you go." "Letting me go? But why?" She was bewildered. "It's like this, an order came through. What it's about and why, I don't know. Not my jurisdiction. I'll go to the chief physician," Kate tried to defend herself. "Please, go ahead, he'll confirm what I said." Mr. Matthews, alas, didn't stand up for the janitor. She was a very good employee, hard to find. She never arrived late, often took shifts that everyone else refused. And the patients loved her for her kindness and compassion. But both the head physician and the administrator found themselves in a trap, as they were involved in the schemes of the wealthy man, who ordered them to dismiss the wretch no matter what. "Your son caused this, and we couldn't not react. The patient is very important. I promised to create all the conditions, and then this happened. I'm sorry." This time, John stayed with the neighbor, playing with her son in the children's area, completely unaware of the consequences of his pranks. Meanwhile, Kate sat on a bench in the park, crying bitterly. Housing, work, school. There was so much to decide, and she had no strength left. What was there to hold on to? How would she cope with everything, and where would she find a way out? After shedding all her tears, she decided, whatever happens, she would endure it all, manage everything for the sake of her son. Right now, the priority was finding a new job. There was still time. She had paid Stan for a month's rent just the other day. They had groceries too, and by August, everything would be sorted out. Yes, by August, she would definitely earn enough to buy John everything he needed for school. While Kate struggled to find a job and tried not to remind Stanley of her existence, scandal after scandal erupted in Edward and Lucy's family. "Eddie, I'm filing for divorce," the woman declared as soon as her husband returned home from the hospital. Pretending to be sick was no longer necessary, they had caught onto him. "Lulu, why so sudden?" he asked. "We can fix everything, discuss it." "And when the police would have come for me to arrest me as the owner of a business with a mountain of debts and dubious connections, what would you have said?" she asked sarcastically. "That wouldn't have happened," Edward confidently replied. "You're just stupid if you think I'm not capable of managing the business." "So you are capable," Lucy laughed. "Is that so?" "Well, you'll regret this," Edward spat angrily, then collected himself, slammed the door, and left. His pride was hurt. He was angry with his wife, and the problems refused to resolve themselves. Why did she meddle in his affairs? Question things, investigate, interfere? He married Lucy precisely because she was so ready to trust and didn't ask unnecessary questions. And now, she didn't want to. What did she even understand? Edward was sure, if Lucy had agreed to take over the company, everything would have worked out. Declare bankruptcy or find some other way to save themselves. He clung to this thought like a lifebuoy, not even trying to find any sense in it. And he was completely convinced his wife would definitely ask him to come back because she wouldn't last long without financial support. How is she, a housewife, without her manicures and massages? He ironically told his friends. "Give her a week or two, she'll come crawling back, you'll see." Meanwhile, as promised, Lucy filed for divorce and began preparing for court to defend her right to the house and car, and also to disavow her husband's debts. After all of these were his personal affairs in which she had never participated. Unexpectedly for herself, being alone, Lucy discovered a strong desire to start her own company. Maybe a small one, maybe slightly unprofitable, but it would be her own business. Lost, dissolved in her husband, she had built her whole life around him. Apparently, it was time to change that. Her professional knowledge had dwindled over the years without practice, but she was excellent at cooking and cleaning, and that was already something. Besides, there was a bank account that her parents had opened for her a long time ago. It had remained untouched, but maybe it was time. After studying the market, Lucy concluded that cleaning services were in high demand, but poorly developed in their area. It took her several weeks to study the industry, purchase tools and supplies, find office space, and register as an individual entrepreneur. When everything was ready, Lucy began hiring staff. During this time, Kate had managed to visit all the nearby hospitals and clinics, worked in a cafe as a substitute cleaner, practiced as a pedestrian courier. Unable to find anything suitable, she despaired and already imagined that she and her son would soon be on the streets. "Why did you do this?" she asked him one evening, upset. "Well, I didn't know it would turn out like this," John defended himself. "He didn't know, oh dear," sighed Kate. But seeing that her son was crestfallen and ready to cry, she still encouraged him. "Okay, don't worry, John, I'll definitely find something. Let's go buy you a backpack, notebooks, pens, whatever else you'll need. We also need paints, brushes, colored paper," he brightened up. "All right, that's good. Just don't stick needles anywhere or to anyone else, okay?" "Okay." Mother and son laughed together. It seemed that the punishment for the misdeed had been enough. Of course, John had acted badly, even if he didn't understand that his actions could get his mom fired. But he had already felt firsthand what such pranks could lead to. A new job posting caught unemployed Kate's attention, and she hurried to call the number listed. The woman was hiring house cleaning staff and offering a decent salary, with the prospect of growth as the company developed. That same day, Caitlin went for the interview. The first thing that struck her was the striking resemblance between Lucy Swanson and Kate. Brown eyes, curly hair, dimples on their cheeks. Only if the former looked older than her years, stylishly dressed and groomed, then the latter in a sweatshirt, jeans, and a bun on her head looked more like a teenager. "Where have you worked before?" Lucy asked everyone the same pre-prepared questions and was quite nervous because she had never conducted interviews before. In the hospital nearby, Kate gestured towards the window, where you could indeed see the upper floors of the hospital complex. "And why did you quit?" "Well, actually, I didn't want to quit, it just happened." "Ah, so they can't give you recommendations?" "I think they can, but not everyone. You see, I have a preschool son, I took him with me, and he put a needle under one wealthy patient. He complained, and I was immediately fired. But don't worry, I'll find someone to watch him while I work, and he'll start school in September." "A needle?" Lucy smiled. "Why that patient in particular?" "My John is very sociable, and that man rudely kicked him out. And he was pretending to be dying for some reason, so my little prankster decided to teach him a lesson," Kate explained, beginning to worry that the conversation was going in the wrong direction. Lucy, on the other hand, brightened up and relaxed. "Awesome. I would even shake your boy's hand in gratitude. Tell him thank you from me." "For what?" Kate was surprised. "You won't believe it, but that wealthy patient is my husband. And all this spectacle was played out for me." They talked and even laughed about what happened. It's a pity that John himself didn't hear it, otherwise, all his guilt would finally have left him. Because as it turns out, he did a very good, kind deed. Lucy managed to find 3 employees and even the first orders for them. Kate, feeling nervous, cleaned carpets and washed windows, afraid to do something wrong. But after a couple of weeks, she felt like she was in her element. Customers often turned out to be pleasant, undemanding, and generous, and sometimes they weren't even home. The employee received keys from the neighbors, cleaned, and then returned them. Receiving money for each order, Kate was able to save. 2 paper envelopes appeared in her closet, one for the apartment and one for school. Fortunately, Stan went on a business trip for a whole 2 months, so at least during this time, they could live completely peacefully. She gained a good sense of self-assurance and a better future. If things continued like this, she and John would move out of this apartment in half a year, and they wouldn't have to tolerate that nasty landlord and his insinuations anymore. She immediately found common ground with Lucy. They even met a few times in a cafe just to chat. Sharing experiences and discussing work, the new acquaintances truly became friends. It was nice to find a close person, especially since each of them was going through not very happy, difficult events in life. John also appreciated his mother's new friend. He quickly stopped being shy and endlessly talked about teachers and lessons. He liked school, but it was hard to sit still. In the evenings, in addition to playing, he also had to do homework. And his already heightened sense of justice seemed to have finally found its time. "Why do they give us so much homework?" he grumbled, flipping through his textbook aimlessly. "We study at school, then we study here. Where's the time for hobbies?" "And what's your hobby?" Kate smiled back. She sat next to him, trying to grasp the essence of the tasks. "How can I have one if I'm doing homework all the time?" Her son replied without missing a beat. "That's true," she agreed. The next day, Kate took him to school and immediately went to fulfill the cleaning job. The apartment owners had gone away for a few days, handing the keys to Lucy, so Kate could clean without distractions or worries. Overcoming all obstacles on the way to the entrance, Kate finally found the right door. It was very unusual to be in such a luxurious elite complex, where everything was fenced off, there was a security guard, and there was a concierge sitting at the entrance. In the elevator, looking at herself in the large mirror, she smiled. It was pleasant to feel how rich and comfortable people could live. The apartment turned out to be incredibly spacious. Out of 5 rooms, 1 was locked. The rest were examples of designer art. Light walls, huge windows, beautiful furniture, everything was incredibly amazing, new, and modern. Kate found the bathroom particularly striking, with a jacuzzi and ceiling-mounted lights that created a beautiful glow. She spent at least half an hour walking among the rooms, not touching anything, examining the figurines on the shelves, studying the paintings, and the huge fish tank. For her, accustomed to a simple, poor environment, such interiors were like museum halls that you could only visit as part of a tour, but you could never live in. Just as she was about to start cleaning, she heard a sound from the locked room that sounded like a whimper. "Who's there?" Kate asked, grabbing the mop tightly for some reason, as if she were going to defend herself with it from thieves. There was some fuss behind the door. It seemed like a metallic cage was creaking as someone tried to break out. "Who's there?" She repeated her question. In response, a whimper came from the captive. Kate went through all the keys on the keychain, but none of them fit. She ran to the hallway, remembering that there was a small key on the shelf above the mirror, for some reason disconnected from the others. Indeed, it was there. With trembling hands, Kate inserted it and opened the door slightly, afraid to see something terrible behind it. The room looked like a storage room. Old furniture, wallpaper, nightstands, and in the corner, a large closed cage. From it, a very thin black dog looked at her hopefully. Next to him was only an empty plate. There was no food left. Kate confidently stepped forward and opened the cage. The dog quietly came out and, bending down, ran out of the room. She followed him, found food in the kitchen, and poured water. After eating, the unexpected resident of the apartment lay down by the door, ready to burst outside as soon as it opened. "Do you want to go for a walk?" Putting aside her work, Kate decided to take the dog outside. There was still plenty of time until John returned, so she could do it all. The leash was lying on the cage, so Kate didn't even think that the animal might not belong to the customers. Anything can happen in life. Perhaps Lucy forgot to mention it, or they themselves were in such a hurry that they left the dog locked up and then asked relatives to look after it. Be that as it may, she needed to walk it for at least 15 to 20 minutes, and then the owners would sort it out themselves. Kate hooked the leash to the collar and led the dog out the door. But he immediately wriggled out and ran away. Apparently, during the time spent in the cage, the poor thing had become so thin that the collar was too loose. Regaining her senses, Kate ran after him. The doors to the stairs were open, so the dog easily ran through them and darted down to the street. The neighbors were bringing in furniture. The door to the staircase was also wide open. To the right was a playground, to the left were exercise machines. The yard was quiet and empty at this time. "Have you seen where the dog ran off to?" "Black, skinny?" Kate asked the truck driver parked right in front of the entrance. "Didn't see it," he replied reluctantly, tearing himself away from his phone screen. After wandering along the paths, Kate returned back. She berated herself for not holding the dog tight enough and for deciding to take him outside in the first place. How was she going to explain this to his owners now? Deciding to search for him after work, she finally started cleaning the floors, windows, and cabinets. Trying to be extremely careful, Kate meticulously completed everything she was assigned to do. Washing her hands, changing her clothes, and gathering all her gear, she looked over the rooms one last time and was pleased with the result. Now it was time to head home. On the way, she kept an eye out, hoping to spot the runaway dog's black figure somewhere. But she found no sign of him anywhere, neither in the courtyards of the houses, nor by the trash cans, nor at the bus stops. The owner was furious when she heard about him, Lucy recounted over the phone as her coworker walked home. Said she wouldn't pay for the job. "Did you have to do a lot there?" "Same as always," Kate replied, as if the lack of payment didn't bother her at all. Strange story. He was sitting in a cage, skinny, hungry, and no one was home. Maybe it's a good thing you let him go. She blabbered about sleeping pills. Like, he was supposed to sleep, and you had no right to open that room. Anyway, let them not pay. We won't go broke over it, as long as no problems arise. They said goodbye, and Kate, after walking just a few meters, noticed a black figure sitting on a bench in the distance. "Where did you run off to?" she asked him, as if talking to a person. In response, the dog licked his lips contentedly and hopped down to the ground. He escorted her all the way home and sat down by the door, waiting to be let inside. "Well, come in." Kate let him in, and to her surprise, he confidently walked to the elevator and then calmly rode up to the 6th floor with her. "John, we have a guest," she informed her son, taking off her shoes in the hallway. The boy ran out of his room with a joyful cry and rushed to the dog. "Mom, where did he come from?" her son asked, his eyes shining with joy. "He ran away from his owners, and I found him," his mother simply explained, avoiding going into details. "But look what he has here." John handed her a crumpled piece of paper. The message contained a short text: "His name is Kai. If you found him on the street, please call this number." After dinner and washing the dishes, Kate gathered her courage and called the number provided. While waiting to hear a female voice, which undoubtedly would have her final words, she still convinced herself that she was doing the right thing. They definitely couldn't keep the dog. There were no conditions, no time for walks, and not even money to buy food. Meanwhile, the dog was purebred. They must have spent a lot of money on him. And judging by the apartment, these people could definitely afford a dog, maybe even more than one. "I'm listening," a pleasant male voice sounded on the other end of the line. Upon hearing that the dog had been found, he perked up. "Thank you so much. You can't imagine how happy I am. Where can I pick him up?" As surprised as he was, Kate gave him her address, and 40 minutes later, a handsome tall man walked into their apartment, immediately seeing his beloved dog. The dog squealed with joy and leaped straight into his owner's arms. It seemed that for a couple of minutes, these two forgot where they were and why they met in such circumstances. Both were so happy. Kate and John silently stood beside them, smiling, not interrupting what was happening. "Where did you find him?" the guest asked, coming to his senses, and handed the woman who saved his precious pet an envelope with money. "Please take it as a token of gratitude." "No, you don't have to do that." Kate blushed. "Maybe some coffee? I have something to tell you." While John played with Kai, childishly hoping to keep the little dog, his mother sat in the kitchen with the new acquaintance. Michael turned out to be a good person, simple, kind, sociable. Inheriting the business from his father, he responsibly worked on its further development, but lately he had encountered some problems. "Kai also came to me from my dad. At first, I didn't want to take him. You have to walk him, take care of him, feed him, take him to the vet, and I had neither the time nor the desire for that. But then I got so used to him that I just can't do without him anymore." "How did it happen that he disappeared?" "Oh, it's a complete mystery." "How did they manage to do that?" "They basically kidnapped him right under my nose during a walk. I let him go, and then couldn't get him back." "Why would they kidnap him, do you know?" Judging by the cage and the sleeping pills, he didn't seem to be of much use to them. "No, he wasn't needed. I just didn't want to cooperate with them, so they decided to exert pressure this way." You can't even imagine how timely your call was. I was ready to sign an unprofitable and even dangerous contract just to get my friend back. People are unreliable. Sitting in this apartment, sipping coffee and eating sweets, Michael somehow remembered his childhood. They lived with their parents in the same human anthill, with the same green courtyard that turned yellow-orange in autumn. "Can we come by again sometime?" he asked, standing in the hallway and somehow not wanting to leave. "Of course, be sure to come, we'll be waiting." "John, you hear, don't cry, you'll see Kai again." The boy really cried. He so wanted the dog, and now that it appeared in their apartment, he couldn't believe he had to say goodbye again. "Okay," he said, pulling his hands away from his face, just honestly. Mike and Kai did indeed start visiting them. Sometimes once a week, sometimes almost every day. Kate couldn't help but notice the changes in their relationship with the man. He took care of her, drove her to work and home, picked up Johnny on weekends, arranged entertainment and trips for them. Before Christmas, the long-awaited event happened. Kate and John moved to a new apartment. On a cozy winter evening, they all sat together at the table celebrating their housewarming. "It's unbelievable," Caitlin looked around dreamily. "Thank you, Mike. I don't know how we would have managed all this without you." "It's no trouble at all," he replied cheerfully. After her husband's death, Caitlin had decided that she would never be happy again and would never remarry. The decision to dedicate herself to her son seemed firm and unbreakable to her, but now she didn't know what to do. Sudden happiness seemed unfair, unlawful to her. She was ashamed of her feelings. "Why should you be unhappy?" "Well, who will benefit from that?" Lucille tried to convince her. "On the contrary, you deserve this. And John needs a father." Those words made her feel better. Indeed, Caitlin was given a chance to change her life. It would be foolish to let it slip away. She would regret it for the rest of her days if she were to push away the man who loved her. This conversation between friends became the last one for a long time. Next time, Kate called from the ambulance and asked to come urgently. Her suddenly felt a strange sensation, as if all body became numb. It was the same when she learned about Brian's death. Michael without questions came, took them with John, and drove to the hospital. Lucy had an accident. According to the policeman, likely brakes failed, and car at speed crashed into fence. Several days passed in same numbness. Kate took on duties of order distribution, went to sites, politely smiled at clients, but inside felt uneasy. It was unclear where strength came from, and she day by day continued to work. Finally called from hospital. Kate turned out to be closest person to Lucy, with whom doctors could discuss plan of further actions. "Luxel Swanson is in coma. Her condition stable," explained doctor. "What will happen next?" asked Kate anxiously. "Next we will prepare for operation, but first I need to explain you some possible consequences." "Well, okay. But you speak as if I have to make decision, do it or not. Aren't you her sister? We always consult with relatives before such serious manipulations." "What?" Kate was surprised. "No, I'm not sister, we're just friends." "Ah, sorry, you very alike, so I from first day thought you were relatives." Strange, but he as if pulled out long-forgotten thoughts from depths of memory. At their first meeting, Kate also surprised by such resemblance, but attributed it to chance. "Ah, by way, what blood type do you have? We will need rare donor. Maybe you know someone from Lucy's relatives?" Fourth. "And nevertheless, just in case, do DNA test," doctor joked. "You fit us as donor, ready to donate blood if anything?" "Yes, of course." "Excellent. Then we will be in touch." Kate decided to do test, as doctor recommended. Evening, sitting at kitchen table, she, without tearing away, looked at small piece of paper, issued to her in laboratory, as if couldn't decipher couple of lines of printed text. "I don't understand," she repeated already fifth time. And asked no one else, how could it happen? Michael asked, also puzzled by results. "Mom and Grandma already dead. Lucy's parents apparently also not alive. Unless find orphanage from which we were taken. I will try to find. Do you have any documents left?" Mike used all his connections. Searched phone numbers, contacted someone. After a week, it could confidently be said that he conducted large investigation, worthy of Sherlock Holmes level. All maternity hospital and orphanage staff were either very old and remembered nothing, or left, but still managed to find contacts of nurse, who after some thought remembered story of 2 little girls. It turned out that girls were taken from troubled family, when elder was only 3 years old, and younger was few months. Both were quickly adopted, but unfortunately, by different families. Girls themselves were too young to remember this, let alone search for each other. "If I had known when I was going to work that I would meet my sister, I still wouldn't have believed it," Kate smiled, gradually coming to herself. "But it's great. Even if it's late, you still met," Michael cheered her up. Yes, now the main thing is for the surgery to help. Can't wait to tell her everything. To cheer her up so that she finds strength to recover. There's something else. I don't even know if she should be told about this at all. They probably won't listen to me at the police. Michael began an unpleasant conversation. What's up? Kate tensed. In short, surveillance cameras revealed that the car's brakes didn't just fail. I was at the investigators today. They asked about Lucy's ex-husband. Is it really him? Apparently, yes. What do you think was his reason for doing this? Anything's possible. When I worked at the hospital, he pretended to be dying to transfer his business along with debts and arrests to his wife. Oh my. Yeah, he's quite a character. Anyway, he won't get away with it now. Lucy woke up after the surgery, but couldn't get up yet. Learning about her relationship with Kate, she couldn't grasp this strange thought for a long time. But over time, like everyone else, she was glad, got used to the new status of older sister. Weeks passed, and she still lay in bed. Soon all the optimistic forecasts were a thing of the past. Most likely, she would have to remain in a wheelchair forever. Lucy herself didn't hear this from the doctors, but she guessed it. To lose her legs, to become disabled after the bright life she had always led, was beyond her strength and emotions. Of course, there was no secret left about her ex-husband's direct involvement in this. These two thoughts brought her to tears. She would never be able to walk again, and it was all because of the person she had trusted for so many years. How could he? Was the offense really so great that Edward was willing to kill her? Happy faces of parents appeared before her eyes again, very pleased with how they arranged their daughter's fate. Lucy, maybe you want to go outside? We'll arrange it. It's so warm there already. Kate tried to cheer her sister up somehow. I don't want to, she replied coldly, lying facing the wall. Maybe something tasty to eat? Just say, I'd be happy to. I don't want anything. Spring was approaching, and the sun illuminated the ward, giving it a more cheerful look. But neither walks, nor food, nor conversations, nothing could cheer Lucy up anymore. It was so hard for her to accept her new self that she didn't even have the strength to politely respond or smile at those who cared for her. I don't know what to do, Kate shared her concerns. You can understand her, Michael sympathized. Yes, I know, but it can really darken from sorrow. In the last days, the sister agonized over whether to share her happiness with Lucy and whether it would be another blow for her. Deciding that it was worth it after all, she came into her room, put a fresh bouquet of flowers in a vase, and sat down next to her. Lulu, she began hesitantly, you know, I learned something here that I still can't believe. What's up? The sister asked without much interest. Well, I'm expecting a baby. For a moment, Lucy's eyes lit up, and she smiled faintly. I'm very happy for you. Does Michael know? Yes. We went to the doctor together. He's so happy. But John doesn't know yet. I don't know how he'll take it. So, how did everything go? Mike asked in the evening. I don't know, to be honest. At first, she seemed happy, but then she withdrew into herself again. Well, how can we help her? Kate didn't expect to get an answer. But Michael was a very practical person and was used to always finding solutions to problems. I have an idea I wanted to discuss with you. I'm listening. All of Kate's attention turned to him. The doctor said there's a chance, albeit small, of recovery. To achieve this, you need to work, exercise, and then there will be a chance to get back on your feet. Do you believe in that? Yes, I do. Michael's confidence transferred to her. He had an amazing ability to restore faith in his own and others' abilities. Perhaps because he always spoke sincerely and could find the right words. Determined, Kate went to her sister. Lucy, here's the thing. We have to fight. We can't just give up like this. What do you mean? She asked with a sad smile. All the doctors who studied your case gave a chance for recovery, remember? Yes, but it's a very slim chance. But it's there. Let's not give up prematurely and still use it, okay? Reluctantly, Lucy agreed to the sessions. Now it remained to find a specialist. And this decision fell on Kate's shoulders. Michael went on a business trip to urgently check some construction site. The cleaning company suddenly acquired a lot of new clients. John started his vacation. Everything at once. Juggling several everyday tasks at once, Kate called someone about an advertisement. When they met, the man seemed very pleasant and educated to her. He showed a medical diploma, documents of additional courses completed. Everything is fine, Kate told her fiancé, very pleased with herself. They start tomorrow. But she couldn't attend these sessions until Mike arrived. And the next day after his return, he puzzled her with news. I checked this specialist, and he turns out to be a former convict. What? Kate was puzzled. What was he imprisoned for? Seems like it was for a fight. Do you want me to tell him not to come anymore? No, let's figure it out first. He seemed very good to me, and Lucy didn't complain. On the contrary, we had a heartfelt conversation on the phone the other day. Well, okay, Michael agreed. After his arrival, everything returned to square one. Kate could leave the restless Johnny with him and visit her sister. At the hospital's entrance, she bumped into Jeffrey, the same doctor orthopedist who introduced himself to her. I'd like to discuss something with you, is it okay? Kate started the conversation. Yes, of course, he replied in a quiet voice. He was a short, stocky man with short blonde hair and blue eyes. Overall, he made a good impression and certainly didn't look like a criminal. How are your sessions going? What do you think of Lucy's condition? Well, it's hard to say, Jeffrey said shyly. I think anything is possible. But your sister lacks desire, motivation. It's like she's already given up and doesn't believe in herself. Yes, that's true. She's been lying like this for 2 months, not talking to anyone, not wanting to move in with us. Well, we'll try to cheer her up. I think she has a good chance of getting better. The main thing is to want it. Thank you, I'm glad. And I also wanted to discuss something with you. Yes, go ahead. I won't beat around the bush. I found out that you've been in prison. Can you explain what happened? Kate decided that his reaction would say a lot. Fortunately, the man reacted calmly. Don't worry, all my diplomas are genuine. I really studied and worked as an orthopedic doctor. Jeffrey paused for a moment, as if returning to those difficult times. I'm sorry I hid this. With such a record, they don't like to hire you. I was very afraid of losing clients. A few years ago, Jeffrey, returning home from work, saw several drunken guys harassing a girl on the street. They ignored his remarks and continued to pursue the poor fragile victim. He couldn't just walk away, but the guys weren't going to back down easily. A fight ensued, the girl ran away, and the guys turned out to have connections. There was no one to protect a simple doctor without money or influential relatives, and he was sentenced to 2 years. But he was released earlier, after 1.5 years, although even this circumstance didn't save him from the status of a perpetual unemployed. You wouldn't believe what I found out about your Jeffrey today, said Michael, sitting down at the table in the evening. I already know everything, Kate replied condescendingly, chuckling. Learning what the doctor had told her, Michael still didn't lose his former self-satisfaction. Well, okay. Do you know who was one of those hooligans? No. Who? Kate became interested. Edward. Which Edward? Lucy's husband? Yes, that's the one. Well, there you go. So, he's getting his just desserts. And indeed he was. Eddie lost everything he had. His business went under the hammer. His apartment and cars were seized to pay off debts, and he was under investigation. Coming to visit her older sister once again, Caitlin listened carefully in the corridor. Laughter could be heard from the ward. Such simple but so forgotten genuine laughter. Opening the door a crack, Caitlin found Jeffrey there. He wasn't supposed to come today, but apparently did so of his own accord. There were unfamiliar flowers in the vase, and Lucy lay on the bed, happily smiling. "Well, I'll go," he said. "See you tomorrow." Caitlin looked mischievously at Lucy, who didn't turn away, as usual. She replied with the same cheerful look. In the summer of the same year, a huge wedding procession drove through the streets of the city, adorned with white flowers and golden ribbons. Parking near the registry office, the newlyweds and guests headed to the beautiful wedding hall. Mike and Kate hand in hand with John, Jeff, and Lucy, surrounded by friends and colleagues. They were heading towards their new family life. By this time, Kate already had a noticeable baby bump. She and Mike were expecting twins. Lucy couldn't walk fast yet, but she confidently stood on her feet, leaning on a cane. The decision to have a wedding on the same day came suddenly, and everyone took it positively. After all, they had been through so much, both bad and sad, but together. Why not celebrate their shared happiness now?